is my 30th anniversary doing VR. The first time I did it was in '86 at Autodesk. My thesis was I designed the world's first virtual reality simulation game for family therapy in '89 and '90. I had a couple articles and a couple books. And I did 3D games. I contributed to the Lawnmower Man as a VR consultant. And I've been around a long time. I'm a mental health and economic development educator that uses entertainment and technology to change behaviors because we don't have time to change attitudes. I've been speaking at this conference since '91. This is my 25th year. Usually they'll throw me a panel and they'll ask me to find a way to make it valuable for both my panelists, but also for you guys. I'm an educator, as I said. I have a master's in education. It's very important that you engage in this conversation, not just listen. And so if nobody asks questions, I'll start asking you questions just to make sure that you get what you need here, because you'll all have questions. And it's very seldom that you get to meet with such a distinguished panel of contributors, plus myself. In any case, not distinguished, but still. So the way I run the panel is I have the panel introduce themselves. So I don't do it because usually I blow it. I'm going to have each of them share a 3 to 5 trends that they've observed in the last 3 to 6 months, so you can see where things are going. Everything's moving very quickly. And then we're going to jump into conversation as quickly as we possibly can. So this panel is the computer-generated humans. It's the state of the art for the creation and integration of virtual characters in a variety of different media environments. Because this show suddenly is 75% VR and AR centric, I'm going to use VR as the context for the questions, but it's really not about VR. It's about all uses of computer-generated characters, movies, television, games, immersive environments, etc. My God, my schizophrenia is coming through. You hear that? That's really cool. Exactly. So, and VR obviously is a very interesting thing to follow. I think we're averaging about $200 million a month in investment in VR and increasingly AR. Watch AR, it's going to be much bigger than VR when they can come up with a sexy application. They're still waiting for it. It's going to be primarily increasingly dominant in the industrial and enterprise space. But VR is a great metaphor for creating environments in which computer-generated characters can be contextualized. And it's also a new art form. I think Nicole in the audience, I'll let her identify herself if she wants to, she doesn't have to, pointed out that we're all looking at the prism of each of these new art forms through our current understanding and our current perspective. This is a new art form. We're only trapped by our perception of linear television or film, et cetera, but the ability to create realities increasingly photorealistic to the point where they can solicit a suspension of disbelief, where you process it directly as if it's real, which is both fabulous and dangerous depending on whose hand it's in, is really actually quite stunning. And I'm an educator. That's how I got involved in this. So I really believe that this is a fabulous opportunity when we come to the point where we can create environments that inspire young people of all ages to learn because they want to. Anyways, looking forward as to where things are going, when you think of VR characters, you might think of Hellblade. How many people are familiar with Hellblade? That's great, all of you. You're just shy and modest. Hellblade is probably the most amazing VR game that's been produced so far with a live, real-time 3D character. If you Google Hellblade Diary 21, you'll see a video on how they do it, but it's extremely complex. It took a lot of time and a lot of technology. Guys like Richard Taylor, Sean, you'll be able to tell people how you do it, but it's not the only way to create these characters. As you're going to hear, there are some new things that are coming down the pike, maybe what might be called the third wave of VR, which is holography or volumetric video. You're going to start hearing that around here as well. The panel represents many perspectives on how to create 3D characters and where they go. And there are other people that could be on this panel, including those that are sitting in the audience right now, and I'm hoping that they're going to participate. So, what we're looking at is various questions as to where all this is going to go, and I'm going to start there And I'm going to begin by having Greg Panos, who I've known since the beginning of the VR wave. The first wave, that's the wave of $10,000 headsets. This is almost 30 years ago. The second wave, by the way, is cardboard headsets. Greg, why don't you introduce yourself? Go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I'm a 35-year veteran of the computer graphics industry. I started at the NYIT Computer Graphics Lab with all the Pixar founders. My degree's in TV production, direction, and film, but I'm self-taught in computer animation and graphics and technology and computer development. My interest in the last 20 years has been in human simulation. I did a lot of work with VR back in the 90s, had a lot of VR systems, taught at university, put thousands of people through VR, and spoke at a lot of events back then. And the conclusion I came to back in the late 90s, when VR was starting to sort of lose a little steam, probably because the adoption rate was low, the cost of technology was still high, was that when VR was ready, when VR had the resolution and the bandwidth and the field of view and the tracking latency all worked out, and it was affordable, what would we do in VR? So the conclusion I came to was that humans would inhabit VR in many forms. So we have the word avatar to describe this. And there are many, 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 many other terms that have been floated over the years. Cyber self, digital double, persona form was one I came up with. And I believe that people will very lovingly and carefully, intentionally craft their 3D versions of themselves throughout their lifetime and add information to those databases that will be used to tell their human living story while they were here in the corporeal world, and will also sustain their memory throughout the time after their life here on Earth. So there's a philosophy of human simulation, and I've been looking very closely at that and the cultural adoption rate, but it requires a very rigorous study of the technology to determine how we're going to get there, how we'll simplify the process, why it's necessary, how it matters to our culture and to the world in general. Thank you.
Okay, so Greg, were those your trends or that's your introduction? I just want to make sure.
It's my philosophy introduction.
Your philosophy, okay. Right. But you have trends to share when I come back? Okay, so we're going to go down and we're going to do maybe 60 seconds. That's why I volunteered with moderator so I could do 90 seconds. And then we're going to come back and do the trends. Now, I've known Greg for probably 27 years. I've known Woody for 27 hours. If you remember the movie Avatar, the scene where the fellow is transmorgified into the character for the first time, and he's running up and he starts to escape out of the clean room where they've just given him his first awakening. There is an excellent actor, fantastic, who's sitting here trying to keep him relaxed and chilled. That was Woody. What? Woody's had, sorry, Marshall. That was Marshall. And Woody is on the side. He's an actor. He's had many wonderful roles. But the reason he's here is he's one of the experts in Hollywood using motion capture to render photorealistic, believable, and authentic characters in drama. And he's a great guy. Woody, introduce yourself, please.
Well, what he said. Hi, my name is Woody Schultz, and I got my start working in performance capture. You actually left off one of my favorite terms, the synthespian.
Yeah, right.
We're not South Carolina.
Exactly. I started about 15 years ago. Just a random audition that happened to lead to a little film called Polar Express, where Bob Zemeckis was developing his own form of performance capture technology. This was around the same time that Peter Jackson and Andy Serkis were kind of developing their own form of performance capture technology to create Gollum for Lord of the Rings. I just got very lucky having gotten in on the ground floor of a very sort of niche technology to continue working with the best in the business, and I've since gone on to do 3 films with Bob. I've worked with Steven Spielberg, Peter Jackson, and of course James Cameron on Avatar, having also done Tintin, Beowulf, Monster House, and it's been incredible to really be a part of the evolution of this technology and to see how it's sort of grown in leaps and bounds. And every year, it seems that the technology grows 10 times faster than it did, the years before. And it's been pretty incredible to watch and to certainly see from the inside out. And I've also been quite an advocate for the technology. I've worked with Andy and others trying to really dispel the misconceptions about performance capture and the fact that it's a technology. It's not an acting technique. That the acting itself doesn't change. Performance capture is just the way in which those performances are recorded. And so doing, I created the Performance Capture Committee at SAG-AFTRA, where I'm also a national board member. That was 6 years ago. And we've been advocating for union coverage and greater understanding and education about performance capture and various forms of technology related to that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you again for coming, Woody. I appreciate that. Joe Zaki, we had a great conversation the other day. I think I've known you 5 hours longer than Woody, but we had a great connection. Again, interestingly, on this notion of social impact, using these technologies for the good. On my graduate school thesis, my opening quote was, "Technology is neither good nor evil. It depends on how you use it." On that note, Joe, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Joseph Zaki, and my background's in visual effects, similar to Woody, actually. I've worked on probably 36 blockbuster films at this point, from Lucasfilm to Sony Pictures to Warner Brothers, and I'm actually consulting at Disney now on Pirates of the Caribbean 5. Yes, there's 5 of these films they're making. So you have a good franchise, I suppose. And my interest in VR really comes from, it's a social place. It's a social place to advance our understanding of each other and what it means to have consciousness and what is consciousness and sentience. And I think, really the exploration is it's wide open right now, and where we see ourselves in the future and memories. I love how you said that, Greg. I think persistent memories for the human species, that's going to be a treasure trove for future civilizations and future people. So my company is called Virtuality, and we're exploring motion capture and performance capture and putting virtual characters into virtual places and developing these really immersive experiences for people to have emotional connections and empathy with the virtual world. So that's where we're at.
That's awesome. Speaking of awesome and emotional places, I want to introduce Joe's neighbor, Sean Stanek. We've known each other longer. We've had a fantastic rapport as humans, but it also so happens that Sean has been in the computer graphic world for many decades, done some wonderful movies, and is also focusing in the area of rendering and instigating emotions and expressions through the art of performance, capture, and CGI. Why don't you introduce yourself, Sean?
Hello, everybody. My name is Sean Stanek. First of all, thank you, David Traub, for having me here, and Victor Hardwood for putting up this amazing forum and event. It's been awesome. I come from the circus. That's where I was born. I was born into the circus as an acrobat, and for many decades, 2 decades, that was my world until I moved into acting, which was, I think, the next leap. And then I got into producing and directing. I started in visual effects on Titanic, actually. And I worked with James Cameron on that. I was in the visual effects department as a coordinator. And it really, working with Cameron really opened my eyes to, like, technology and pushing the boundaries in one's mind and soul, and just all the technology that was kind of like hitting us at that time. And I think Christopher Bellasi right here, who worked at Digital, were you working at Digital Domain at the time? House of Moves, right. That was the advent of really using motion capture for film. Right now, what I'm doing is I've gone on to direct video games as a performance capture director, and currently I'm an editor, and I'm in the reality business in terms of sizzle reels for clients that I can't talk about. But there I found a whole other adventure in terms of being an actual editor and putting performances together in a live action sort of forum. And that really is going to impact how we move forward with VR. We got to really understand that the performance of an actor and what that all is extremely, you know what I'm saying, right, Woody? Yep. It's extremely important, because at the end of the day, an actor's performance is put together by an editor. How are we going to do it in VR? And I've come up with some ideas and techniques to do that. Anyways, that's who I am.
And when we start thinking about motion capture, and we start thinking about computer graphics in movies and immersion in virtual reality, we have to start thinking about where it all began from a feature film perspective. And that brings me to Tron, which was really the first movie that showed immersion. It may not have been virtual reality, you can argue, but it was certainly immersion. And thus, we are blessed and honored to have Richard Taylor on the panel as well.
Thank you.
The thing that really struck me about Richard Taylor is, I said, what is it that you aspire? What is your meme? What drives you? He said, beauty. I want to capture beauty in the world, virtually and otherwise, so that people come to know their own beauty, however they experience it. Maybe you can introduce yourself.
Hi, yes, I'm Richard Taylor. Thank you, David. I have been in the Directors Guild for over 30 years. I'm a fellow in the Visual Effects Society, but I started initially at Robert Abel and Associates back in the early 70s and did all the Uncola and See the Light commercials. Then worked on Star Trek the feature. I designed the Enterprise and all the models for that franchise. And then Tron and Looker and a few other features that I worked on. I was Cinematics Director at Electronic Arts for 6 years, doing all the Command and Conquer cinematics, which were live action and CG combined, some of them entirely CG. And for the last 6 years, I've been doing 3D for films. I did the credits for Shrek 4 and some other things, but primarily I've been involved in the VR world. But the elephant in the room that I'm involved with is I am not really particularly interested in any of the headset forms of VR. To me, it is like a sketch done by a gorilla on acid with a candy bar.
Using the acid to paint.
Yes. I'm interested in a theatrical scale virtual reality that is photoreal, so that I can recreate that gentleman right there and absolutely believe that he is sitting there in a theatrical space that is not on a headset that I'm sharing with these gentlemen. We can share it together, and it's dimensional around you, and it is immersive. I don't believe that these headsets are immersive. You're looking through a window at a world that you don't know it's there unless you look around, and you're by yourself, and there's a lot of fatigue involved in them. And they're low res, and the resolution and the contrast, you're not going to see photoreality inside a virtual headset for a long time. So I'm interested in the theatrical scale of this and creating the holodeck, which has been there forever. And it's doable now, and we have a process in eliminating projection to do this, but basically creating a solid state LED theater, polarized LED or active LED, and that particular process can be scaled up or down. So that's kind of generally where I am with all of this.
Okay. Now, I like controversy. No, I don't. Sorry. I was just thinking Monty Python. You've just heard 5 Department of Arguments, spare time. You've heard 5 masters, all of whom have done major projects, major movies, and all around CGI. But CGI is not the only way to capture reality. And so I'm very happy also to have invited the Firebrand or Counterbalance. And I would like to introduce somebody I consider a friend who does not come from the same place that other people come from the background, not a computer scientist, not an engineer, but an anthropologist who began to marvel at the world while hiking across the mountains of Colorado and the Midwest and probably about 30 or 40 countries, and thought, how can we capture life to share it with our children? How do we capture our parents before they leave? How do we capture anything with authenticity and photorealism so that we don't lose the things that are precious to us? So I'd like to introduce Marshall Millet.
Thank you very much. I think for one reason to be here is to offer an antithesis to a way we've been doing things for a while. And it's an honor, first of all, to be amongst everyone here, but also sort of attack a different way of approaching it. So most people in CGI, when you come at it, in order to create a virtual asset, you're building skeletons and you're creating skins and you're recreating a way of simulating the real life. And one of my backgrounds for the last 6 years has been attacking how you actually bring the real space into a digital one. So that began through 3D cultural heritage work, or recording the world, and these were static scenes. It became very clear if I can recreate a near perfect photorealistic static scene, that's a single moment, a single instance of our lives, and what we're missing is the people themselves. So the question became how you really address that, and from a not only a cinematographic way that Hollywood has started to use it, but how do we as a people socially start to get access to a system that can record us as full spatial fidelity. So I went to San Francisco, and for the last 3 years, butted heads with a lot of people, say, hey, this is impossible, I have no idea what you're talking about, and was lucky enough to now be in a space where it's becoming a fundamental need in order to produce virtual reality, augmented reality, and just even a digital interaction experience. So we're just coming from the other way. How do we collect billions of reality points that can be represented into a space?
Okay. This is what I call real holography, by the way. It's near real-time capture that you can go into from any angle, and it's life. How many people here have seen The Lawnmower Man? And how many people remember how the movie ended? Okay, so the movie ended when Job got pulled into telephony, into the global brain, and he got stuck in there, and he made it his. And I'm not articulating very well, but actually it's a true story. But it wasn't Job; it was actually the director, Brett Leonard, who got stuck in there. And here he is, calling in from Copenhagen, doing a virtual reality video, a music video over there with a wonderful musician named Claes Kem. And Brett, please introduce yourself if you indeed must. I think everybody knows who you are.
Hey, how you doing? From Copenhagen. It's actually been great weather here in Copenhagen. It's very unusual, which is great. But I'm just, first of all, honored to be on this panel. I think this is a great panel. You put together some amazing people, David. I look forward to just listening. My primary thing is being a storyteller. And now as I move into VR, being a story worlder of, telling and dealing with the poetic aspects of virtual humans. And so I'm now doing a number of projects that are trying to set some context for this new medium, using traditional mediums and connecting them to virtual reality and augmented reality. A few of them, one is a television series called The Futurist. I'm also developing Lawnmower Man Reborn, which will begin as actual virtual environments and then move to a narrative that connects the dots, so to speak. And I've also recently, in the context of The Futurist, written it kind of an homage to Isaac Asimov, my 5 laws of virtual reality, to the 3 laws of robotics, again, in a fictional context, and very much as a way of just stimulating discussion. So that's what's happening for me. I've also just created a company with my partner Scott Ross, who was the co-founder of Digital Domain and ran ILM and Lucasfilm for George for many years. We've started a company called Virtuosity Entertainment to be a premier VR content and AR content company. So that's what I'm up to these days.
Thank you. In my effort to be funny, I forgot to mention that Brett and I have been friends for a very long time, and I'm very grateful for that friendship and all the opportunity that Brett has given me by allowing me to have worked on his original big movie. Thank you very much, Brett. So what we're going to do now, we're going to move forward, and everybody's going to give 3 to 5 trends. We're going to try to keep it to about 2 minutes each so that we have at least 15 minutes for an actual real conversation. I'm going to begin with Greg, but I know that Greg also wants to give you a URL to write down. So Greg, you've got 2 minutes to share your trends.
Okay, great. A lot of my trends have been collected into a flipboard that I created. I just created a panel and spoke at it called Avatarism, the Personalization of VR at the Silicon Valley Virtual Reality Conference this past week. So I have a slide deck and I have a flipboard, which you're all welcome to study and look at. The flipboard has quite a few links in it, so if you do all your homework, we'll have quite a conversation in the future. So the links are housed at my website, the Persona Foundation. So it's www.personafoundation.org, all one word, /avatarism and /links. So the URL with the extension /avatarism will take you to the flipboard, and if you want to look over the slide deck from the previous one, www.personafoundation/slides. So I think that will be very helpful for everybody. As far as 5 trends that I feel comfortable having identified, the personification of VR as a general trend is something that all of a sudden will make sense to everybody nowadays. And they'll desire it when they see it working and they engage in it. We're already doing it a little bit with Facebook, but in a linear form, text-based, picture submissions, text submissions. It's not the same as having interpersonal communication with a fully photorealistic version of a person or oneself or some other construct, which is going to be much more engaging. So Facebook has got it. Google's got it. They're all getting it now, and they're all hiring people in this particular area of expertise. A lot of us in Hollywood and Los Angeles have been using these techniques for years to tell stories using 3D digitization techniques. So another big trend in 3D digitization of surfaces are outside-in video, volumetric video tracking. Companies like 8i represent some of the newer VR-related content companies. They just got $15 million given to them or whatnot. XXYYZZ Array down here. There's a dozen of them all around the planet, companies that digitize people using different kinds of cameras and photogrammetric stitching and the like. So those are professional tools. They're studio-based, require a lot of computational skill in order to create constructs of individuals in those spaces. But the prediction I'm going to make is that your camera, is as simple as it is to just walk around somebody and take some video completely around them, or a number of shots from photographs or harvested from the web, is enough information to apply a deep learning AI to extricate and to build a 3D database of that person and to handle all the mapping and color correction as well, to have a relatively believable avatar which will serve you in a lot of what VR will be to come. And another trend I'm noticing is that people are talking a lot about VR and the adoption rate and the uptake. You need a $2,000 system, you need an $800 or $600 visor to go with it. So a lot of people are arguing, well, there's no way that the population is going to pick this up in the numbers that are going to be necessary. I lived through the 90s. I had some very expensive VR systems that I created or were given to me from various vendors, and contributed to develop and to increase interest in the field. I took them everywhere. I put a lot of people through VR, and everybody wanted it. They all wanted access to it. If they could have had it for a couple of $1,000s, the uptake would have been very high back in the 90s. So from my point of view, a couple of grand isn't a lot of money to get into VR nowadays. And I think the extra hump of spending all that extra money to get into VR is also a motivating factor for people to say, you know, I spent all this money, I would like to do some development here. I've got some great ideas of my own. So it'll be a new platform, though. People start creating things and becoming developers. People will be upset about their kids spending so much time in VR. Well, if they're creating something and something really interesting that catches on or is relative to our culture, then that will be something they didn't predict that their kids will have accomplished by participating in VR and spending the money.
Woody.
Well, not surprisingly, my trends kind of stem from a performance perspective. I will continue every 6 months to predict that we are just on the verge of eliminating the uncanny valley. And I'm sure that 6 months from now I will say that again. The other thing that I see slowly happening, I say slowly because I've really been pushing this for, as I say, about 15 years for the acceptance, but I really do think that we've kind of approached the tipping point where the performances that are captured through performance capture technology will be considered equally alongside those of their live action counterparts. That they will not be sort of, I guess, ghettoized for lack of a better term.
Fast and Furious.
Exactly. I mean, I was shocked. I knew the technology that was being used in Fast and Furious. I knew the extent to which it was. As you know, Paul Walker unfortunately was killed in a car accident during the filming of Fast and Furious, and was an integral part of the majority of that film. They reached out to both of his brothers to finish that film as body doubles, as voice doubles, and through performance capture technology to recreate Paul facially, physically, and those performances were driven by his brothers. What I didn't know is the extent to which that was done. I thought that it was probably somewhere around 50%. What I found out after the fact, it was closer to 80% of his performance in that film was done through performance capture.
And I understand that the union has complained, the Screen Actors Guild, right?
I'm not aware of any of those complaints.
He was in 266 scenes.
And yeah, absolutely incredible. Painstaking and incredible. Yeah, and I think certainly the work that Andy and others, Andy Serkis and others are doing in film is certainly leading to that tipping point. For the last two Apes films, there have been very aggressive Oscar campaigns on his behalf. And I think that we are at that point now where the casual fan of these films will look at these performances, and within the industry, the people that are judging and giving awards for these performances will view them alongside, not as something specific to be segregated into a special category as best performance capture acting, but just best actor alongside any other live action counterpart. So I see that as a trend that's happening. I also see, and this is based, I just got back from the FMX conference in Germany, and the company that I was working with, Film Engine, that was born out of Crytek, which has an incredible game engine, I was doing demonstrations for them on the virtual production stage, where we had a virtual background, a live action actor, and a performance capture actor, who was me, all recorded live in real time, rendered almost fully, and recorded and edited all in the and in real time.
Real time.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
and also the virtual camera was linked to an actual Aeroflex camera, and you were able to control the focus, the zoom, everything through the actual camera. You didn't have to rely on the virtual camera, and you could see the entire performance with the performance capture character, the digital human, and the live action character, and the virtual environment, all through the lens of the camera. I think that's a game changer when it comes to video games, when it comes to feature films. So I think that's an
It's interesting.
important
It's
trend.
bringing the locus of power back to the director.
Absolutely,
Because the technology
absolutely.
is no longer, taking the initiative.
Right.
So the director, it's just another tool.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Joe, one thing, Winning Swimmer. Tell me about it.
Winning Swimmer is my production company that I started, and
400 IM.
in a nutshell, it was created because it just reminds me at all times that no matter how hard a battle you think you have before you, that you've already won the hardest battle that you will ever face because you beat about 250 million other little swimmers to the egg.
That's awesome.
So,
Joe, speaking of
That's where that comes from.
being there in a position to manifest your vision, what are your trends?
Oh boy. So I'm gonna look out a little further, and I see trends in the next 15 to maybe 40 years. And for me, it's really about machine learning and how computers will begin to enhance our ability to discover new technologies and to discover things at a much more rapid pace than we're able to now. So machine learning is a huge one for me, which will lead into strong AI, as we're calling it, I guess, these days. And strong AI as opposed to just regular AI. AI being kind of a lower form, I guess, of AI, where it's just picking up behaviors and analyzing smaller data sets. But when we talk about strong AI, strong AI would have more, leading into consciousness and sentience. So my third trend in that would be computer sentience and non-biological consciousness. And what does that mean? And how will we accept these creations or these entities as real as a human being? So has anyone seen the movie Her? Mm-hmm. Most of the audience, right. So perfect example of strong AI and sentience leading into a conscious entity of its own. And I truly believe that is going to be the future. Now, regardless of if it's going to be entertainment or if these things will just be used for medical or science, I think that all the roads are pointing toward this phase in human evolution where we will depend upon these kind of computer systems and intelligences to push us even further. So it'll be exponential, our understanding of the world and science and discovering what it means to be human even deeper. Because once you start to connect with an artificial intelligence at that level, it has to be incredibly human for you to suspend your belief and to suspend your own emotion. So it'll be interesting times when having a virtual girlfriend such as in Her will be completely acceptable in society, and people will not even bat an eye if you have a non-physical body as your companion or your partner. So I think that is really exciting field, and I see that virtual reality and augmented reality and mixed reality, whatever we're calling it these days, it's all just leading to this other evolutionary step that we're going to take together as people of this planet. So
Brett's nodding his head because Brett's been visualizing this for 20 years. You want to break format and just make a quick comment?
Oh, I just totally agree. I think the overall trend is transformation. This is a reflective medium of human consciousness that's reaching out to us and reaching out to our dendrites to be able to express the fact of who we actually are as humans and our greatest imagining of that idea. And I think that's the trend. It's the fact that there's something greater here than just this technology. That as virtual, when we talk about virtual human, we were becoming as how we interface with technology. I also think that the AI component connected to things like eye interaction will create a true intimacy in the context of our expression as in terms of true interactive narrative. That is, for my mind, more connected to ritual, tribal ritual, than it is to almost any other form. So I'm looking back to ancient forms to express this transformative aspects of this, as opposed to more current forms. And I think that's great what was being said.
All right, that's great. I actually had two quick questions. Joe, I know that there's a new form of AI that Google and other folks are talking about that is AI in combination with the human brain, purportedly to help overcome some of the questions about where AI can go in a bad way. What is that called? It's a new term. Is it AI or something like? It's like the military is already using it. They've already apparently experimented with embedding chips and things like that.
So neural mapping.
Is it neural mapping? There's a
I'm
form
not
of
exactly
AI that
specific.
actually is in sync with the human brain to provide the moral component.
A moral component.
Have you heard
It's
about
interesting.
this?
I haven't. I'm gonna have to Google it now.
Just a really quick
Of course,
aside.
the military is doing it.
Yeah, just a quick aside. I was at a party at New Year's Eve up in Sausalito where I live, and I met a gal, very beautiful, very buff, very Chinese, and because I have a military background and I've dusted a little bit with the intelligence community because I'm very global, I got a sense about her, and I did some sort of trick questions, and I was right. She's DIA, and we connected because we had some friends in common, and we knew things in common. And she asked me what my greatest fear was for the planet, and I said, besides war, it's the impact of the rising oceans, because the lack of real estate is going to impact food production. And then I talked about the grid. I go, what about you? She goes, looks at me in the eye, says, killer AI. 50 years from now, this is what I fear for my children. So that hasn't left my mind either. I know the South Koreans already have fully automated 50 caliber weapons with infrared on it, and nothing can escape it right now. What are your thoughts about that?
I mean, I think that there's obviously a huge moral component to these creations, and I don't know if I share in the fear of it, because I think that I do believe still in the human spirit and the human being. So it's not loud enough. I just have a feeling about the human civilization. I think that we're going to continue even beyond past killer AI or killer robots. I just think that we're not necessarily it's stupidity, but kind of like stupidity. If we're going to build creations that can destroy us because we're insignificant, I think that's part of the lack of programming, perhaps.
Maybe that's what we're supposed. Maybe that's what we're supposed to
Programming
do.
flaws.
It's possible. I mean, I don't have all the answers, but I believe in the human being, and I believe in the human soul, and I believe that we're going to be here for a long time. And I don't think it's going to be some killer missiles from our creations that are going to destroy us.
Yeah, thank God that humans sometimes make the right decisions, like, no, let's not create nuclear weapons. On that note, the scientists who did it were doing it to see if they could. They weren't thinking of the moral implications. Sean, what are your trends, exclusive of eliminating nuclear weapons?
Okay. Well, I knew there was going to be some overlap here with all of us up here. It's got to be. But going on what you were talking about earlier, Greg, about creating humans and leaving an imprint behind and having that as a archive. How many people out here have experienced personal death? I'm just curious. Can you raise your hands? Yeah. Experienced personal death, like something very personal, people in your family, right?
Personal death.
So since the age of 9, I have experienced personal death a number of 16 times. Very close people in my family, very young, very different sort of deaths and stuff. And not to be morbid, but this is actually a very interesting time to bring them back. And there's a project called the Elysium Project, and it's by this little indie company called Paranormal Games. And both the founders, their fathers had died very suddenly, and they were one, I think it was Steve and Steve and Nick. Well, I think Steve said to Nick, man, you know what? I can create all these worlds and environments. Why don't I just create my father? And they were like, wow. So they started this project. And, you know, at the end of the day, if you think about it, if you're able to take, if I could see my cousin who died at 33 again, who was a wonderful human being, would I do it? Is there that creep factor? Is that taxidermy thing, you know, where people have their dogs and it's in the corner and you're like, oh God, you know. Okay, but, you know, at the end of the day, if that's what makes you feel good, if that really, you know, hits you viscerally, then go ahead and do it. With AI, you know, with video, with recordings, with photogrammetry, with all these tools that we have at our fingertips, we're really close to creating our loved ones again. And if you use how many of you are familiar with Magic Leap, the Magic Leap technology, right? Think about that. You're sitting in your living room, and there's your dad or your mother or whoever, your cousin, your brother. And through AI and through all this learning, they be kind of, even the voices are the same. What if you could talk to them again and just push a button and kind of go, hey, what's up, Pop? And he just says, hey, what's up, son? And you kind of talk about real world things. Do you leave him on and do you connect him to the internet so he's got all this knowledge? And think about where we can go with that. I mean, I think that's like a massive trend. It's going in that direction. Courtrooms, you know, I was involved in a murder case in 2001. I was very close to, and if I could, you know, recreate the scene for the prosecutors or whoever wanted to see it, I could show them exactly how it went down. And I know that they are doing that. They're actually using Previs, Chris, to do that in a VR environment. But think about recreating a scene and really showing people's perspective on that scene. Again, who's, you know, is that person right or is that person right? I don't know. I don't know how that works out yet. So I think there's a trend there, and I've read some really interesting things about that. You know, at the end of the day, you know, you're working on the holographic trend, right? I worked on The Sixth Day.
Oh, I love that movie.
You remember that movie?
Yeah, I love it.
So what was really interesting about that movie is you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger goes into the mall and there's the pet holograph, and so people were doing at that time. You're nodding your head. You remember that, right? Well, with what's happening now, obviously there's overlap here, but that's going to be a huge trend. So with Magic Leap, you take off the glasses. Magic Leap uses the light field projection on your eyes, so you're kind of able to. It's called mixed reality. You look through the goggles and you actually see things in space in your living room, and you can get a gun and you can shoot people or you can have conversations. So it's very
both.
interesting. What? I'm
Or
sorry.
both.
Yeah.
You can shoot them.
Yep.
If you talk to them.
Yeah. As you're dead. Boom. Right.
And Richard worked on Looker.
What?
Looker was a seminal movie in the human simulation, and you worked on that movie.
Yes.
Looker.
Oh, you got to watch
I didn't see it.
1981.
Oh, okay, Michael Crichton, cool. Anyway, those are sort of my thoughts, but I think if I could bring my loved ones back, that'd be awesome. Anyway.
That's great.
Yeah, go for it.
Richard.
Yeah, 1 second. So I'm going to kind of reiterate some of the things that we've talked about here. The Paul Allen example is a great example of, as you brought up, the uncanny valley and whether we've gotten past that. Gollum was one of the first steps in that, and then, of course, Benjamin Button. But this Paul Walker film, if you never were told that he's in that film 266 times, it's pretty amazing that we are that close to creating totally believable computer-simulated people. There's a fatuation in this world to recreate famous people. As you know, the Tupac Shakur thing at Coachella a couple of years ago, and Michael Jackson at the Music Awards, and now that same group that's doing Musion, which isn't really photoreality and isn't really a hologram. But the one thing about it is people aren't wearing glasses, so that's. But they're translucent. They aren't really dimensional, and there's a very narrow angle of view that illusion works. But point being that people are really interested in recreating famous people, be it Frank Sinatra and the Rat Pack at the Sands Hotel or going to Leonardo da Vinci's studio. And that trend is going to keep evolving. It's difficult with the headset resolution and so forth to create people that are really totally photoreal. But as the theatrical formats evolve, which is, again, what I'm primarily interested in, although I am working in the headset world. So one of the trends that's evolving beyond the continued evolution of motion capture driving characters, I don't know if any of you people saw the piece that was at GDC that Epic Games and the Unreal Engine did for Hellblade, Sonya's Revenge, where the character was driven in real-time facial mocap and full body mocap of a character that you could actually get close to. It wasn't totally photoreal, but that's a trend, to be able to drive characters in real time. In the theatrical space that we're designing, we are able, our basic concept is that you can have a photoreal CG character that's driven in real time standing next. So you could have Sinatra singing with Pink and do it in real time for real. That will happen. Pretty much anything you can imagine about where all this is going to go will happen. You know, the speed at which it happens is unique. The amount of time it took from Tron to get to Jurassic Park was half the time I thought it would take. The speed that we evolve all of this software and hardware is pretty amazing. One of the trends that's out there now is the evolution of spherical stereo camera systems, the Jaunt being probably the most noted and the highest resolution and the highest frame rate and all of that. And then, of course, the Nokia Ozo, which is a product that any of you now could go out and rent and shoot in stereo a virtual environment. And we are working, I'm actually working with Nokia on a project now to take plates that we shoot with that against green screen, mid-ground characters and backgrounds, and bring that into post, stitch it properly, get the stereo pairs, and roll that into post and add characters, track it to add dinosaurs or hummingbirds or whatever else it is. So that trend is evolving. Cameras that can shoot photoreality, so we are not dependent upon computer simulation to create everything in these virtual worlds.
Thank you. Marshall, some trends.
Well, I think, and this is a very sophisticated audience and presenters, so I think we're talking about some high level, and to talk about 40 years into where it's going. But I think one trend right now is this conversation. We're in kind of a MySpace age of people's understanding of VR, in that MySpace was this huge social platform with a lot of adoption, but it was all fake. I could be anything that I wanted to be on MySpace. I can put up a fake name, I put up fake pictures, I create 5 of them, and I'm this representation of my online self. And, well, that failed miserably against the onslaught of what Facebook did, which is say, you have to be real, and we're going to make you real, and this is your identity, and you're going to represent yourself online that way. So we're obsessed with what we can be, with the superpower of virtual reality, but I think what is fundamentally not being talked about is that it's the reality that kind of matters in that context. And I think in movies, we're so influenced, all these ideas and the futuring that we're doing. So most of the conversation is futurist, and it's the technology companies, right? So it's either creative futurists or it's technology companies that are leading the conversation. But we don't know what general people think, and it doesn't matter to them yet too much because they aren't a part of VR. And if you can turn people immediately and put them into that, it changes their perspective entirely. And right now, I think we're just really playing with the creative side and what you can kind of fake and what you can be and what we can represent. But if you ask the question, if we can represent, we get rid of, if Uncanny Valley is a thing that gets solved, and we can represent people however we want, you start turning the question, why does that stuff matter? Because it's not actually relating to who we are as individuals. And this place is the first time I see that conversation, and people are talking about spirituality, they're talking about dream state, They're talking about not just a movie, but a way you're moving through and interacting with space. And so I think that's a trend that you'll start seeing everyone else start to latch onto, because that is what virtual reality should be about, is this superpower, but how it relates to us as individual humans. And I think it's starting already. So,
Any more trends?
nope.
I wanted everyone to see my head. That's a trend. Brett, can you still hear us? We're not on video right now.
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, so Brett, go ahead and share your trends, if you don't, from Copenhagen. Looks like it's about 12:26 at night there.
Shank of the evening. Yeah, I think one of the trends, I'm seeing is that there's a realization that the current first phase of VR is really going to be just a phase. That we're going to be moving into what is going to be truly interactive, immersive, narrative VR as the next phase, given certain technological enablement. So like the 360 camera thing, which is very cool in its own right, it's immersive cinema for many things, is really not VR. And it's going to be something that moves more towards, data point cloud, light field cameras that are going to be able to give us true agency world, and the use of artificial intelligence and eye interaction connected together to create a true intimacy and empathy in the interactive narrative. Things that people are starting to realize is a trend that's where it's going. So I think the trend that I'm trying to at least add to, which is talking about an ethical framework for this medium, which is incredibly powerful. It's going to be, it can hardwire neuronic pathways in children. So no matter what, this industry is going to be hitting a trend regarding just the use of this medium, and not in the context of censorship, but in the context of just a discussion around an ethical framework of something this powerful. Because I think it is about human interconnectivity. I think a lot of the people on the panel talked about social VR being at the center of what the more positive usage here, and I believe that's very key. And one of my 5 laws is about the fact it has to be about humans not creating greater alienation than there already exists with our digital devices. So that's one of the trends.
If anybody,
and I just think,
go on.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Nope.
And I just think that's that leads to the trend that people are realizing this is not just a medium. It intersects with many other things that are going on, both in the sciences and in sociological terms, that are pointing toward the revolution and evolution of the human being. And for me, one of my laws is that this medium be, matter of fact, the ultimate law is that this must be the medium of the global human. That we have to become interconnected in a way, express our humanness at a global level, outside of nation states, even outside of cultures. Something that truly connects us to, something at a greater level of understanding of each other. And I think this medium can be that. And so I believe that people are starting, as they start to experience greater and greater levels of virtual and augmented reality.
Okay, Anne, you had a question. Okay, somebody said hallelujah in the audience, Brett.
And that's, for me, it's got to be the discussion now. Let's do this before this becomes something that's truly here, because it's not quite here yet, but these discussions have to happen now. And there's also a trend that there's going to be a wall hit, because the adoption rates, the revenue is not going to match expectations and the hype for a few years, and in that process there's going to be a trend of going for the lowest common denominator, because to try to make the medium.
I have a question. Does anybody think it's a coincidence that we're all wearing black?
Bring that part of the discussion.
Right, we're in LA. I noticed that. Woody, did you have a comment? Because I saw you. I felt your.
No, I guess yeah. It was interesting this past week at FMX in Germany. Honestly, the entire conference for a week was dominated by VR, and all the major studios were there, and they all had their little headsets, and they all had their little 5 to 10 minute VR clips for people to walk around and experience. Some of it interactive, some of it really kind of just a visual, but it all came down to really being a gimmick at this point. And
Yes.
Panelist after panelist kept saying, including there was one gentleman I thought was very interesting and provocative, saying that, look, we have sort of, at my company, been working on VR for about 20 years now, very quietly, and all we have found is that it's dead end after dead end after dead end, and nobody is talking about that. Everybody's heralding VR, as they should. It's really, it's its own thing, and it's really exciting. And the possibilities are very exciting, but at this point, creating content for an audience that doesn't even know what they want from VR is really almost useless. Yet we are sinking so much money into it and so much time into it.
I'd like to just say that I believe that one of the things that's really essential, because all of us that have drank the Kool-Aid of VR and AR, we get it on one level, but there has to be a context created, for the larger participants out there, the greater, and for me, that's where my focus still is. I mean, I created content for the medium in a couple films, 20-some years ago. Now it's something that's here for real in a much more, touchable form. And the context still needs to be created. And part of that context needs to have the understanding of what the power of this can actually be. And I think that's, of course, as a storyteller or story worlder, that's what's most interesting to discuss, that mythopoetic nature of where this medium takes us.
Now, I would ask a question that I retained that reflects nearly all the conversation initiated by Marshall, which is, well, wait a minute, if AI, VR, AR, all this stuff is coming to the point where we're going to smoke out the imposters, what do you do with people that don't have self-esteem or don't want to be real? They want to be fake. Where do they sit? But I'm not going to ask that question. I'm going to ask Gary his question instead. Again, it's depending on how to use it. I heard about an AR app in the healthcare space where the docs wear a camera and the entire experience is recorded right into the electronic medical record, and it's saving a lot of money and it's saving lives. So what is your question? How do you guide the morality so that the bad stuff doesn't happen?
We're talking about it. Yeah.
David, you've got your chin in you look like that Greek character that has a big question to ask. Okay, you have a question? Nice. Okay, sir, you in the blue, you get to be the one I ask. What's your question? Yes? And make it up on the fly if you must. Do any of you see Snapchat?
I'll take that one. So, not so much interested in Snapchat as I am interested in Snapchat Discover. I don't know if anyone's checked out that side of the app. Amazing stuff. And what's amazing about it is that it is kind of a walled garden. I mean, it's catered content. But what's great about it is that it's sometimes interactive, it's sometimes passive, just nonsense, and you get 5 to 10 mini experiences within the theme of like MTV or Mashable or whatever brand is putting out their Discover content. And it's a great model, I think, for a lot of the confusion in VR, because what I see a lot with the platforms of VR is that it's not specific enough, or even worse, that they're too specific and they're ignoring opportunities or potential with content. And I think Snapchat has really hit it where it's branded entertainment, it's interactive at times, it's passive at other times, and it's a really exciting way to approach design problems.
I have a quick question for Laura Chen, who's reading. I've been told that, assuming that China and America had the same populations, the application or the integration of VR would probably be at least 3 times as big for cultural reasons. But also, there would be less potential consciousness around protecting people or having a moral discussion. Where do you see morality, or where do you see VR going in China relative to social benefit? And that's a complicated question, but what are you observing? Laura Chen is probably the world expert in Chinese media for the American media companies, and the opposite. That was her answer. Next.
So we're spending a lot of time looking at Chinese market, in particular for what we want to do. And my answer to that is that you're seeing more of a younger middle class that hasn't been addicted to media type. It's very new in China as far as getting things thrown at them in a lot of different ways. So in the States, I think we're more entrenched. I'm going to watch my movie, and then TV comes at me at a certain way. And so VR has become a very Hollywood conversation in the United States. It's not a media Hollywood conversation. I mean, it's along with it in Asia, and as far as both India, China, and Japan. But there, culturally, people are using it as their Skype, as their platform. They're adapting it. The headsets are already out there, and there's a growing market that just wants to do more VR-ish type of stuff. E-commerce, whole malls being built around it, theme parks. So it's developing faster there, and you've never seen technology do that. We have been the thought leader. We're in San Francisco. This is where it happens. This is where venture capital happens. China's moving faster about this particular media than we've ever seen them do with any other technology. And I think it's a cultural thing. I think they're ready, and they're more adapting, and as a people, they're ready to enter that state and interact more freely than what Americans are going to do.
I think Sonny Dillon this morning in the VR and investment panel said he just came back from Beijing, and they had essentially a VR meetup there, and there were 2,000 people completely oversubscribed, and another 2,000 that couldn't get in. And they were all investors and like developers and pre-qualified individuals. They weren't just casually interested people.
Yesterday was big. ICT, I think they hosted this.
Right.
They are the one. This is a large provider for digital distribution platform, or some people call it Netflix in China. This is a big. Actually, my observation about young people, they're taking orders. My observation, this younger generation, people born in their 90s, they're not so much different from the kids from the States, in my experience. They are more free spirited. They spend money. It's very different from the people born in the 80s or their parents. They're willing to pay. So it's very different, the younger one, because even the people born in the 80s, they grow up and watch Disney movie grow up.
Yeah.
They watch U.S. A lot of young people get U.S. culture from those TV, from soap opera.
So I'd like to, are there any more burning and pertinent questions that could be? Yes, Nicole, please. Yes. Last one.
Yeah. What do you see as sort of the benefits and hazards of continuation of our life in the digital space as our avatars self? And I mean, as me, I am in real life, and then my avatars will
Okay.
go on
let me share that question with Brett also, and I'm going to ask everyone to give their final comment unless anybody really wants to say something. Brett, the question was, what are the pros and cons of people increasingly living a digital life with their avatars out there, possibly even acting autonomously? And maybe you can all give a very quick closing comment. Please keep it to 30 seconds.
It's right there.
Well, I think again, the humans wire and become addicted to is the idea of getting beyond the limitations of corporal existence. And this medium could, I think there's going to be a lot of desire to experience these transformative states of self. And so as long as they're focused in a way that connects us to other humans and continues to have that as opposed to alienation, I think that is an initial benchmark to set. It's, you know, something to go, and look, for me, telling stories, sometimes fairy tales, and about to create story worlds that have a lot of, you know, ability to have infinite story threads within them. The things I'm looking at for antecedents for guidance are the kinds of things that you would call like shamanic guidance in the context of indigenous rituals, some of which, ritual of corroboree, they had 50,000 without war on the Aboriginal continent in Australia for a reason. And there's a ritual there that I experienced that was, for me, the most transformative VR experience without technology that I ever had. So I'm looking to these kinds of forms for guidance, and I think we need to continue to look in interesting directions to guide us in this, you know, in this pursuit.
Thank you, Brett. Sleep well in Copenhagen. Let's try to keep closing comments to like 20 seconds.
Sure. I would refer everyone to the homepage for the Persona Foundation. The first page addresses a lot of these things. In my opinion, legal status of virtual entities or constructs in the future, who can dissolve them, who can modify them, who can change various facts in evidence about their existence or their description per se. Martine Rothblatt is a name that you might want to Google, who's a lawyer who's taken a lot of interest in this area and done a lot of thinking.
Woody.
Just very quickly, on the VR front, I think the most intriguing aspect, and we really didn't get too deeply into it, is just the ability to experience, to expose people to other cultures. I think through virtual reality, if you can immerse yourself in other worlds and other religions and other cultures, I think that's will be extraordinary.
That's great. Joe, 20 seconds.
I have 2 words: unfiltered history.
Nice. Sean.
I think at the end of the day, going back to what you were saying about studios, thinking, okay, what do we do with this technology? For me, it's very clear. When I did Beowulf, the actors came in, they were like, when's the close-up? You're always on a close-up and you're always on a master, okay? It's the same thing with VR, but the eyes are outside, from outside in, inside out. I'm trying to, anyway, so here's the deal. I think that performances need to be designed, blocked, scenes need to be blocked, and with lighting, with using what Disney called the weenie, being when they designed theme parks, you build a steeple, and that's how you guide your player, your customer. Same thing in storytelling in VR. You can be done with lighting, specifically with sound triggers, just like games. But remember, who and what A-list actor is going to take the first step? Because performances are built in the editorial room. Yes, they give a great performance, but at the end of the day, it's the editor that times that performance out, okay? So you take a scene, he's looking down, you put that in, you plop it in, he took a moment, he took a pause, you built that as an editor.
Richard, 19 seconds. You got 5 more
Sorry,
from
I
Joe.
had it at
Yeah. I think you're going to see the evolution of some more VR formats, one of them being the simulator that 1 to 8 people can sit in, that can be connected worldwide by the cloud, that can be used for education, can be in natural history museums and school libraries, can be used for education, research, design. That's inevitable.
Marshall.
I'm really surprised. I think I'm really with Joe. I mean, this is about an archived sort of Earth human experience, and and focusing on how we actually capture reality as a system of truth to measure ourselves is going to change the way we think about ourselves.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.